All right, ladies and gentlemen, it does appear that there is more official news on the new endgame mode, Wuthering Wastes. And as we're all familiar with that 2.1 livestream, there wasn't really a lot that they showed about it. They showed a couple of screens from the UI, didn't really dive into any of the mechanics, and didn't really show any of the gameplay at all. And so my assumption was, well, they're just going to be drip feeding some of that information out after the live stream to continue getting us hyped for the patch. And it looks like that's exactly what Kuro Games did here today. So with that, version 2.1 will introduce the brand new permanent challenge gameplay of Wuthering Wastes. That's crazy. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look. So, born of evil tides, swarms of tacit discords weave a deadly web, luring every passing soul. Once again, it falls to you to cleanse these treacherous waters. So as you can see, waters, boats, we're really going to be focused on the sea for this version of the endgame. And I guess just knowing that the Tower of Adversity is landlocked, this is a really interesting way that they're actually going ahead and framing the endgame, right? It's in a completely different sort of environment, a little bit like Pirates, right? So as we can see, the eligibility of this event or of this endgame is to reach UL 30 and then complete a tutorial quest to actually get geared up for the mode. So it is, in a lot of ways, very close to this idea of endgame. You're going to require at least a couple of days. You can't get UL 30 immediately. It's going to take you a while to get there if you're starting off on a new account. So that progression is going to be built in. So when it comes to the gameplay rules, in WuWa, assemble unique lineups and equip distinct tokens to conquer challenging levels. So this is going to be a bit different from the TOA from the perspective of, I do believe that the teams are going to be locked. We won't be able to transfer equipment, and there's going to be unique buffs via these tokens that you can equip to your teammates to actually make them perform in the way that they need to. You're going to complete challenges to earn points and accumulate enough points to unlock rewards, including, well, obviously, astrites, premium resonance potions, and premium energy cores. All of the traditional stuff that we might expect from an endgame mode. Everyone's looking out for this, the astrites, the permanent currency for pulls. So, how to play it. So, progression through Wuthering Wastes requires completing all of the challenge stages within each of its constituent areas. So, you're going to have Forbidden Waters, Respawning Waters Chasm, and then Respawning Waters Torrent. And so I've already seen how the layout is going to go. Forbidden Waters is sort of like the current very easy version of the tower that everybody does once and then it never resets. You're going to have Respawning Waters Chasm, which is sort of like the monthly reset that they have going on that's slightly higher in difficulty. And then Respawning Waters Torrents, which is going to be like the challenge mode, the hardest one that doesn't award as many astrites as the prior stages, but is there, you know, as sort of like the last part of the reset, sort of like the middle tower in the hazard zone. If you don't do the middle tower, you lose out on a couple of astrites, but it's not like you lose out on a majority of them as long as you do the previous part of the respawning stages. So as you can see, the layout over here is really focused on boats. It's pretty much the same thing as the tower. You're going to be going from fight to fight. The levels are going to be progressing a bit like this, going all the way from 1 and then descending downward to 11. The first 6 appearing in Forbidden Waters, the next 6 appearing in, or really the next 5 appearing in Respawning Waters Chasm, with the last level over here, Respawning Waters Torrents, looking a little bit more dark, looking a little bit more gruesome, and obviously, I think, presenting the biggest challenge of all. What you're going to notice is that the design of this is going to look a little bit different than what we currently have in the endgame. The current Wuthering Waves endgame, the Tower of Adversity, is instead structured in this way, where you have 4 challenges across each of the sides that are unlocked, completing one after the other, with the middle challenge in the hazard zone, right, which is kind of like Respawning Waters Torrents actually being available immediately. And so this is going to be a bit more of a grind from that perspective to get to the harder challenges, and you're going to have to complete a lot more in the actual Wuthering Wastes to get to those final stages faster. So do keep that in mind. You're not going to be able to challenge the hardest stuff right off of the bat, much like how you're able to in the current version of the endgame. So it's actually much more similar to the Spiral Abyss that you might be seeing in Genshin Impact, or something like Warzone from Punishing Grey Raven. So let's get some more details on what the stages are going to be looking like, and this is where things are going to get a little bit spicy, ladies and gentlemen. Each challenge stage consists of 2 halves, the first half and the second. you will need to deploy a team of 3 characters for each half. And each challenge is going to have a special environment and enemies. So, as you can see over here, we have stuff like glacial and spectral damage being increased, a certain number of points that we need to reach, and then a grade from B to S, with 1600 points required for the full S grade. And so, as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, you can't do one challenge at a time. This means that for those familiar with pincer maneuver warriors, this also means that you might not be able to share echoes, and you might not be able to share equipment or weapons. And so this means, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have 2 copies of this weapon, 2 copies of variation. This weapon over here is basically the best in slot support weapon in the game for all of your healers. And not having this can mean a lot of trouble for your rotations, where you're going to be generating your concerto a little bit slower. You're going to be getting up and running a little bit slower, just across your supports, and then generating all those buffs for your teammates. Another thing to keep in mind is that having a lot of signature weapons is finally going to have a positive effect for your account. For example, I only have 1 copy of Stringmaster, and my Jeja's build and my Yinlin's build are very reliant on this weapon. However, with the current structure of the Wuthering Waves game mode, it's going to be very hard for me to run a team composition like this, with Yinlin and Jeja both on one side, because I only have 1 copy of Stringmaster to share around. And so what this means is that, unfortunately, I might need to run a character like Yang Yang or Tao Chi instead of Jeja, or Jian instead of Carlotta. You want to have a wider spread of DPS characters across different equipment types if you have been sharing, just to ensure, right, that you have enough equipment to share around and actually complete the game mode. This is going to be a big difference than the current structure of the Tower of Adversity. Whereas in the Tower of Adversity, you are able to share around weapons, you are able to share around echoes, and what this game mode is showing us is that, well, you're not really going to be able to do that anymore if you have to lock in the teams and then just start the challenge, and there's no time to swap equipment in the middle of the clear. However, we don't know if there is the opportunity to swap equipment in the middle of the clear. We just know you can't do that in Pincer. And the design of this UI looks really similar to what we have in Pincer. Aside from that, the game mode is going to have some unique buffs as well. For example, when entering a challenge, Concerto energy is restored to 100%. This means that you're going to have your outro skills immediately ready off the rip as soon as you enter the game mode. However, as we can see on this second side challenge, when entering a challenge, Resonance energy is restored to 100%. This means that you might need a special buff to actually have your ultimate or your Resonance Liberation available at the start of the clear. And so on this side, I'm imagining you actually don't have your liberations. You only have your outro skills ready. While on this side, you don't have your outro skills ready, but you do have your liberation ready. And for some teams, right, having your liberation is a lot more important than having your outro skill. For example, on this team where Concerto energy is maxed out, this seems useless for the Carlotta team. What are you going to be doing without Carlotta's liberation? What are you going to be doing without Shorekeeper's liberation? And what are you going to be doing without Jeja's liberation? So you might have to think of way different teams, way different lineups to fully leverage these buffs, because as far as I'm concerned right now, the ordering is just wrong here. I do believe the ordering is wrong here. These teams should be flipped if you're actually trying to play these actual compositions. 1,000,000% these teams should be flipped. So maybe a bit of user error on the devs end, or maybe they're just intentionally, showing how the mismatch can happen. Now, the most unique part, potentially, of the Wuthering Waves game mode, the tokens. So, for the tokens over here, we're going to be clearing stages in Forbidden Waters to unlock different token types. In Wuthering Waves, every team must equip tokens which grant special effects during combat, and completing a challenge consumes 1 token use. And guess what, guys? The token use can be restored by resetting the challenge. And so, if you realize, man, I used this really strong token over here, right? This one that's increasing crit rate by 40% and crit damage by 80%. Maybe I didn't need to use this overpowered looking token on my clear where I didn't need any of that extra damage at all. So all you do is simply reset that stage and then choose an easier token to use, so you can save this more powerful one for later. However, this also means that some of the fights in this game mode are going to be absolutely ridiculous. And for some players, it might feel like the fight isn't possible unless you do use one of these overpowered tokens. However, what this also means, ladies and gentlemen, is that you could just intentionally nerf yourself intentionally use a weaker token if you're a player that's looking for a big challenge. This, to me, satisfies a lot of the different asks in the endgame mode for a lot of different players. You'll be able to use these tokens, right, if you're a little bit less skilled, you're not learning the best rotations for your teammates, or you don't have the best echoes going into it. And you can use these as a bit of like a crutch or a handicap to clear and get the full rewards. While if you're a player on the very, very sweaty end, right, who lives on the apex of combat and learning the best rotations ever and gearing their characters in the best way possible, you can just simply not equip a token, or in this case, just equip one of the weaker tokens that we're seeing here. We can clearly see there are green and blue ones, the weaker tokens that don't really do anything, and then move forward that way. A lot of variety that we're getting from this whole token system. I love its implementation. And for the people, right, that want that pat on the back, the people that solo Danjin, that solo Rover, that do all of these different things to clear, they'll be able to choose exactly the type of experience that they want and curate their own difficulty that way. And so to me, this is going to be the highlight of the mode. Get people in and out with very powerful tokens if they don't know what they're doing, but then also reward players who want really difficult combat and let them choose their own difficulty. And that's what I think these tokens do, or that's what I'm hoping these tokens are going to do. Lastly, the rewards. The rewards, ladies and gentlemen. So for Forbidden Waters, the non-resetting one, or what I believe is the non-resetting one, Astrite, gold, XP, and then tuners. Everything everybody could ask for. In the Respawning Waters, 625 Astrite, all the gold EXP stuff, and tuners, again, what people want. And then in Torrents, which is supposed to be the hardest, basically the hazard zone, the middle tower of the current TOA, only 175 Astrite, barely more than a pull, and shell credits. So, to me, this breakdown of the rewards is as consumer-friendly as it's going to get, right? You're going to have some pretty easy difficulty ones rewarding you the Astrites that are going to get up higher and higher for each level on the reset. But then in Torrents, the super hard ones, you don't have as many rewards. And now it's time to get into the challenge cycles. So, rewards for Forbidden Waters can only be claimed once. Like I was saying before, that is going to be the baseline easier difficulty one. However, in Respawning Waters Chasm and Respawning Waters Torrents, those will be recycled periodically with varied content and effects, freshening up the endgame experience. And when the cycle resets, progress is cleared and you can challenge again, much like the current structure of the endgame. The first Wuthering Waves challenge cycle will be available right after the version 2.1 update on 2.17, and it will go all the way to 3.17, which is when the second Wuthering Waves cycle is going to begin. And then starting from that second one, each cycle is going to last about 4 weeks. And so as you can see, the hazard zone reset has already occurred. The Wuthering Waves first reveal, or the first version of the Wuthering Waves, is going to occur halfway through, or not really halfway through, but really early on through the version release. And then it's going to go on a bit more of like a hazard zone, Wuthering Waves, hazard zone, Wuthering Waves, hazard zone sort of setup. So basically, we can imagine that each endgame is going to have a month that it's active, and then in the middle of that month, the next endgame is going to refresh and reset, and you'll be able to experience that. So it is a really similar structure to what we saw for things like the Imaginary and Theater and Genshin, and how it started sharing more of that endgame time with the Abyss. But depending on how varied these buffs are, how it feels, how unique each of these endgame modes feel, we'll see whether or not this feels like it's too long. And of course, Kuro can always get the feedback that it does feel too long, and we can go ahead and see how they adjust from there. So it's basically a 2-week cycle, exactly what we have right now, but instead of TOA resetting constantly, it's going to be a mix between Wuthering Waves and the Hazard Zone. Overall, I would say that this endgame mode looks like it is going to be a blast. I do believe that there are a lot of different challenge levers. Obviously, there's going to be a greater need for equipment, so it's going to be harder overall, because you won't be able to share things like echoes across your supports, weapons across your teammates, and you might need a more varied roster or start using different equipment types to really, get the most that you can out of this mode. But we still have to see how impactful those tokens are in your clear, because it might not matter if you have to use a weaker weapon on the DPS you're usually playing, if the tokens are just so absurdly powerful, right, that you just slot them in and you're able to clear. Because again, this thing boosts your crit rate by 40% and your critical damage by 80% every time you cast an intro skill. Ladies and gentlemen, that's better than any weapon in the game. I'm just going to say that up front. This effect is stronger than any weapon or Sonata set in the game, and you'll be able to use it up to 2 times. How crazy can this challenge be? All right, so with that, love how you can choose your own difficulty. Love all the different features. Love the rewards. Let me know what you all think. I think Kuro really is going to hit it out of the park with this one. Peace out.